Hey, what's your name? Let me see your ID.
Sir, what's the reason you need it?
We got a call, and it seems like you may be a suspect, so just show me ID.
I did nothing wrong. This is nonsense.
Let's step outside and talk. Come on.
No. If I'm not detained, I'm staying right here.
Let's go. Outside. Now.
Don't put your hands on me.
What happens when a cop demands ID from a calm black customer in a cafe, can't name a crime, and still goes hands-on because the guy keeps asking basic legal questions? The answer isn't what people expect because the cameras didn't just capture a bad stop. They captured conduct that later got torn apart in federal court. Where are you watching from? City and state? Drop it in the comments. And if you like stories where receipts beat excuses, hit like and subscribe. Juniper and Slate in Riverside Heights was in weekday mode. Coffee line, laptops, quiet conversations. Officer Tyler Wainwright walked in and immediately targeted Derek Lawson near the front area. He demanded Derek's ID. Derek didn't argue, he didn't posture. He asked two things, calmly: whether he was being detained and what the legal reason was. Wainwright didn't give a clear answer. He repeated the ID demand. Then he tried to move Derek out of the building, telling him to step outside. Derek stayed put and asked the same questions again. Detained or not? What lawful basis? Wainwright's tone tightened. He kept pushing for Derek to move. Out the door, away from the counter, away from the crowd. The problem was, Juniper and Slate had cameras, multiple angles, entry, register, seating area. Maya Rios, the cafe manager, stepped in. She told Wainwright's staff hadn't called police. She told him Derek was a customer. She told him the business wasn't trespassing him. Wainwright brushed her off. He acted like her words didn't matter. That mattered later, because it killed the most common excuse. The business wanted him removed. Wainwright escalated anyway. He closed distance. He blocked Derek's path. He demanded ID again. He tried to force Derek outside again. Still no clear crime stated. Customers started recording on phones, not loudly, just steadily. People knew what this was turning into. Then Wainwright put hands on Derek and tried to steer him toward the door. Derek didn't swing, didn't shove, didn't give Wainwright the reaction he could label resistance. He kept controlled, kept asking the same questions, kept his hands visible. That's the chess move Derek made without announcing it. No chaos to rewrite later. A supervisor got called. Sergeant Elena Park arrived, took in the room, and asked Wainwright for the lawful basis. Wainwright tried to justify it with vague language. Suspicious person, noncompliance, ID refusal. Park looked at the facts in front of her. The manager wasn't trespassing Derek. Nobody at the cafe had called. No specific crime. So Park chose the cleanest option. She ended it. She disengaged. No arrest. No forced removal. Wainwright wasn't happy, but he had to back off. Most people would have treated that as the end. Derek treated it as step one. Because he knew the next danger wasn't in the cafe. It was on paper. He immediately asked Maya about the security footage. How long it's stored, who controlled it, how to preserve it. He also started a timeline in his notes while details were fresh. Time of entry, the ID demand, the attempt to force him outside, the manager's statement, the hands-on moment, the supervisor's arrival. He wasn't chasing attention. He was locking down evidence before anyone could lose it. Derek didn't treat Sergeant Park ending the stop like a victory. He treated it like a closing window, because he knew what usually happens when an officer realizes they pushed too far in public. They retreat in the moment, then rebuild the story later in a report. So Derek stayed at Juniper and Slate and handled it like evidence. He didn't wander around asking people what they thought. He went straight to Maya Rios, the manager, while staff and customers were still in the room and the scene was still fresh. He asked where the cameras were positioned and whether the system recorded continuously or only on motion. He asked how long the footage stayed in the system before it overwrote. He asked whether the recording saved locally, to the cloud, or both, and who had the login and the authority to export it. Maya didn't hesitate. She told him staff hadn't called the police. She also made it clear the cafe wasn't asking for Derek to be removed and wasn't claiming he was trespassing. That point mattered because it cut off the most common excuse officers used later: the business requested removal. Derek asked Maya to preserve the entire segment, not a trimmed clip. He wanted the minutes before Wainwright entered, the full interaction, and the minutes after Park arrived and ended it. He asked her to preserve it from every camera angle that caught any part of the encounter, including the entry area, the counter line, and any wide shot that showed positioning and movement. He specifically asked for a copy exported with the date-time overlay, visible if the system supported it, because he didn't want anyone arguing later that the timing was unclear. He also asked her to keep the original file in the system untouched, because exported copies are useful, but originals are harder to challenge. Maya agreed and took it seriously. She pulled up the system and started identifying the relevant cameras. One of the staff members who had access helped too. Derek watched without hovering. He just made sure they were pulling the right time window and not missing an angle. While they worked on that, Derek opened his phone and started writing a timeline. He didn't write a diary entry. He wrote a sequence. He noted the approximate time he entered the cafe and where he stood. He noted when Wainwright walked in and how quickly he targeted him. He wrote down when the first ID demand happened and when Wainwright tried to force him outside. He wrote down that he repeatedly asked whether he was being detained and what the legal basis was, and that Wainwright did not clearly state a crime. He noted when Maya stepped in and said staff hadn't called police and the cafe wasn't asking for Derek to be removed. He noted Wainwright dismissing her and continuing. He wrote down the moment Wainwright went hands-on and tried to steer him toward the door. He noted that he kept his hands visible and did not strike or shove. He wrote when Sergeant Park arrived, asked for the basis, and ended the stop. He also wrote down what witnesses were doing because that becomes important later. He noted which customers had phones out, where they were standing, and the angles they likely captured. Not because he wanted them involved in drama, because he knew witness video fills gaps when Bodycam gets blocked, turned off, or pointed away. Once he had the cafe side preserved, Derek moved to the government side. He didn't wait a week. He didn't wait until he felt calmer. He treated the first 24 hours as the only time he could control whether records got cycled out under routine retention. He drafted preservation requests directed to the police department and the city. He requested the body-worn camera footage from Officer Wainwright and Sergeant Park, plus any in-car camera footage if the unit had it. He requested dispatch audio, the CAD log, and any call notes associated with the event. He requested the incident number if one existed, and if it didn't, he requested the timestamps and unit identifiers used to locate it. He asked for any supervisor communications tied to the response and any evidence handling logs showing when video was accessed, copied, or reviewed. He also asked for something people forget: confirmation in writing that a hold was placed on those records. Derek wasn't going to accept, "We'll look into it." He wanted an acknowledgement that the city understood it had a duty to preserve. Then he filed his complaint quickly. He didn't write it like a rant. He wrote it like a record. He described the stop, the lack of a stated legal basis, the manager's statement that the business hadn't called and wasn't removing him, the hands-on escalation, and the supervisor's decision to disengage. He included that there were multiple independent recordings, including cafe security footage and witness phone video, and that he had already requested preservation of Bodycam and dispatch records. That's what changed the posture of the entire situation. Derek didn't just say, "This happened." He said, "This happened, and these systems recorded it." A few days later, Derek saw why he'd moved fast. Wainwright's written report started circulating through the normal channels, and it didn't match the reality witnesses saw. The report leaned on vague labels like "suspicious person" and treated Derek's refusal to provide ID like that, alone justified escalation. It framed Derek's calm questions as non-compliance, the kind of wording that makes a stop sound lawful, even when the officer never stated a clear crime. The report also suggested the officer had a business-related basis, the kind of implication that makes it sound like the cafe wanted Derek removed. That was a problem for Wainwright, because Derek already had the manager on record saying staff hadn't called police and the cafe wasn't asking for Derek to be removed. And that statement wasn't private. It was made in public, in front of witnesses, inside a building covered by cameras. Then Derek noticed something that pushed this beyond a standard complaint. The report didn't just seem wrong. It seemed like it was being shaped. Details tightened in a way that didn't feel like correcting a typo. Language shifted toward justification. The report started reading less like an officer writing what happened and more like an officer building a legal defense for what he did. Derek couldn't prove the exact moment it changed from the outside, but the pattern was obvious enough to raise a serious allegation that the narrative was being revised after the department realized recordings existed. At that point, Derek stopped thinking like a complainant and started thinking like a case file. He organized his timeline so it matched likely record timestamps. He listed every evidence source that could be subpoenaed or requested. He identified the key contradiction that couldn't be explained away. The officer implied a business-based removal, while the manager clearly said the opposite. He flagged that the stop lacked an articulated lawful basis, and that the report's framing conflicted with recorded reality. He didn't need to speculate about motives. He didn't need to argue online. He just needed the mismatch on the record. Because once the issue becomes video versus report, departments can't bury it the same way. That's when internal affairs has to pull footage. That's when supervisors have to explain why an officer ignored the manager. That's when evidence handling becomes relevant. And that's when outside scrutiny becomes possible. Derek understood that. He built the foundation before anyone else could rearrange the facts. Derek didn't have to beg anyone to take it seriously. The mismatch did that for him. Once his complaint landed with a timeline, preserved cafe footage, and pending records requests for Bodycam and dispatch, the department couldn't treat it like a he said, she said. They had to pull the recordings. If they ignored it and the video surfaced later, it would look like a cover-up. Departments hate that risk more than they hate a complaint. Internal Affairs opened a review. They pulled the CAD entry that supposedly brought Wainwright to Juniper and Slate. They pulled dispatch audio. They pulled Wainwright's body cam and Park's body cam. They asked for the cafe footage through formal channels too, because they needed their own copy with documented chain of custody. And that's when things started breaking. The dispatch trail didn't match the energy Wainwright brought into the cafe. There wasn't some clear call from staff saying a customer was threatening people. No request from the manager to remove Derek. The "why are you here" part stayed vague, which meant Wainwright's report had to do extra work to justify what his body cam showed. Then the video comparisons started. Cafe footage showed the officer entering and locking onto Derek without doing basic fact-checking with staff. It showed Maya stepping in and saying staff hadn't called police, and the cafe wasn't asking Derek to leave. It showed Wainwright brushing past that and continuing anyway. It showed the physical contact happening without Derek attacking or lunging. It showed witnesses filming. Bodycam added something else. Tone, proximity, and the way Wainwright kept trying to move the interaction outside. That's a pattern investigators recognize. Fewer cameras, fewer witnesses, more control. Park's body cam mattered too. It captured the moment a supervisor asked for the legal basis and didn't get a clean answer. It captured Park choosing to end it instead of escalating it into an arrest that would have looked worse on review. Now, the report. Investigators compared Wainwright's written justification to the recordings, and they kept finding gaps. The report leaned hard on vague terms that sound official, but don't actually explain lawful grounds. Suspicious, refused to identify, non-compliant. That language gets used when an officer needs the reader to assume there was danger without describing a real crime. Then came the bigger problem, the report history. Departments track edits, sometimes loosely, sometimes clearly. Investigators saw signs the narrative changed after the recordings were requested or reviewed. The timing was bad. The phrasing got tighter in the direction of legal justification. That raised a specific allegation. Wainwright didn't just write a questionable report. He may have tried to retrofit the facts to match what he'd already done on camera. That's when it stopped being only about Derek. Because if one officer is willing to adjust reports after video exists, you don't just review the stop, you check patterns. Internal Affairs pulled other incidents tied to Wainwright in the same unit. They started with stops that had similar language in reports. Same phrases, same structure, same refuse to provide ID framing, same claims about businesses requesting removal. They cross-checked those with whatever recordings still existed. Bodycam, store cameras, dash cam, jail intake video, even 911 audio. They found enough inconsistencies that supervisors couldn't pretend it was isolated. At that point, the city attorney's office got involved. Not because they cared about Derek's feelings, because liability was now obvious. A recorded stop with no stated lawful basis, followed by a report that doesn't match video, followed by signs of revision, turns into expensive civil exposure fast. Then it reached the level department's fear, outside eyes. The case got referred for civil rights review. When federal investigators look at a stop like this, they don't only ask, was this bad? They ask, was this part of a pattern? They ask about training, supervision, discipline history, and whether supervisors ignored warning signs. They ask whether evidence was mishandled or altered. They ask whether prosecutors relied on those reports in court. That last part triggered a chain reaction. If Wainwright's reports were unreliable, cases he touched became questionable. The city and department started flagging arrests and stops tied to him and his unit. Some defense attorneys filed motions. Some prosecutors quietly reviewed files. Some old cases got reopened because the credibility issue wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was documented. Wainwright got pulled off the street during the investigation. Administrative leave at first, then tighter restrictions. No public contact, no discretionary stops. The department started separating him from situations where he could create more evidence problems, and Derek kept doing what he'd done from the start, keeping it clean. He responded to requests. He provided copies of what he had. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't add new claims. He stayed inside the record. That discipline made him hard to discredit, which is exactly what Wainwright needed to do to survive. As the investigation expanded, more people came forward. Not because Derek went viral, because the department started asking questions, and people started realizing someone was finally taking the complaints seriously. Witnesses from other stops described similar pressure tactics, demands without clear reasons, threats framed as orders, and reports that didn't match what happened. By the time the review reached its late stage, Wainwright wasn't facing a routine discipline meeting. He was facing a credibility collapse. And that's the difference between a local complaint and a federal case. A local complaint argues about behavior. A federal case argues about rights, records, and truthfulness under color of law. By the time outside investigators got involved, Wainwright's problem wasn't a complaint. It was that the record didn't support him, and the record kept getting bigger. Internal Affairs finished its review first. They didn't have room to play neutral. Cafe cameras showed Wainwright pushing the stop without a clear legal basis. Witness video backed it up. Park's Bodycam showed a supervisor asking for lawful grounds and not getting a clean answer. The manager's statements undercut the business wanted removal angle. Then the report issued turned it into something more serious. Investigators focused on when the report was written, what it originally claimed, and how it changed after the department knew recordings existed. They pulled system logs. They pulled revision history where it existed. They interviewed people who handled the file. They compared the report language to what the videos actually showed. That's where Wainwright's situation collapsed. The report didn't just sound off. It looked designed to justify actions after the fact. That's not a style problem. That's a truth problem. The department terminated him, not because they suddenly grew a conscience, because they could see what was coming. If they kept him, every case he touched would become a credibility fight, and every future stop would risk another recorded failure. But termination didn't close it, it opened it. Federal civil rights scrutiny moved in hard once the evidence handling and report accuracy issues came into view. Investigators didn't treat the cafe incident like a one-off. They treated it like a window into how Wainwright operated and how his unit was supervised. They pulled other stops tied to him. They looked for the same patterns: vague, suspicious person framing, Idaho demands, without clear lawful grounds, escalation when someone asked basic questions, and reports that leaned on stock phrases instead of specific facts. They checked Bodycam when it existed. They requested third-party video when it didn't. They reviewed whether prosecutors had relied on Wainwright's reports to win charges. That triggered reopened cases. Some were reviewed quietly. Some got challenged directly. Any case where Wainwright's word was the backbone became a problem, because credibility is the backbone of policing. Once that breaks, it breaks everywhere. The city tried damage control. They started negotiating. They reviewed policy. They pushed training language. They tried to frame it as one bad officer, except the investigation kept pulling at the supervision thread. Who approved his reports? Who ignored earlier complaints? Who kept putting him on the street, doing the same kind of stops? Derek stayed consistent through all of it. He didn't do TV interviews every week. He didn't turn it into a personal brand. He kept responding to official requests, kept his timeline consistent, and kept his focus on records: video, dispatch, body cam, logs. That approach made him hard to attack. No exaggerations to pick apart. No contradictions to exploit. When the federal criminal case landed, it wasn't built on outrage. It was built on documentation. Prosecutors laid out the sequence. Wainwright escalated a stop without lawful grounds, ignored the manager who contradicted the supposed reason for police involvement, and went hands-on while cameras recorded it. Then he generated a report that didn't match what the recording showed. Then the report appeared to be revised in ways that moved it toward justification after the fact. That combination matters in federal court. It turns into questions about deprivation of rights under color of law and falsification tied to official proceedings. It turns into evidence integrity. It turns into whether someone used a badge to do something unlawful and then tried to cover it with paperwork. Wainwright tried to defend it the usual ways. He tried to frame Derek as uncooperative. He tried to make the ID issue sound like a threat. He tried to lean on officer discretion. None of that works when the video shows calm questions and no stated crime, and when the manager's statements and dispatch trail don't support the officer's narrative. In the end, the federal prosecution didn't need dramatics. It didn't need a viral mob. It had what courts respect: multiple camera angles, body cam, dispatch records, and a clear conflict between recorded reality and an officer's written story. Wainwright was convicted and received a 15-year federal prison sentence. After that, the fallout widened. The city paid. The department faced oversight pressure. The unit's prior work stayed under a cloud. Supervisors had to answer for what they missed or tolerated. Training got rewritten in the ways cities always rewrite training after a lawsuit: clearer documentation rules, stricter body cam compliance, tighter standards on suspicious person calls, and more explicit discipline for report falsification and evidence mishandling. Derek didn't come out of it happy. He came out validated. That's different. He got what most people don't get in these situations: an official record that matched what happened. And that's the takeaway. Derek didn't win by being louder. He won by being precise. He stayed calm, asked the right questions, didn't give the officer an excuse to claim resistance, and immediately treated it like an evidence problem. So let me ask you, if you were in that cafe, would you have recorded? Would you have stepped in like Maya did? Would you have done what Derek did and locked down the footage the same day? Drop your thoughts in the comments and share this with someone who thinks paperwork doesn't matter. It does. And if you want more stories where accountability comes from facts, records, and real consequences, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
All right, what are you doing back here? Who are you waiting on?
Waiting on a driver? What's the reason for the contact?
Loitering back here taking notes. This area's had problems.
Understood. I'm federal law enforcement, on duty. I can be verified through dispatch or supervisor.
Don't lie, man. You don't look like federal. I don't want to play games. You're under arrest.
Hey, hold on.
What happens when a local cop decides a calm black man doesn't look like a federal agent and keeps escalating even after the guy says he's Secret Service? The answer gets ugly fast because the body cam didn't just catch a bad attitude. It caught misconduct in real time. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, state or country. And if you're here for stories where power trips backfire and accountability actually shows up, hit like and subscribe. These are the ones that need daylight. All right? Here's what went down. It started mid-conflict behind a shopping plaza, near the service lane between a pharmacy and a coffee spot. Early evening. People coming and going. Cameras on every corner. A couple cars idling at the curb. The kind of place officers love because they can check things out and feel in control. Officer Ryan Kessler had Malik Carter pinned in that invisible box cops use when they want compliance without saying the word, close distance, squared shoulders, one hand hovering near his belt, the other gesturing like it was directing traffic. Kessler kept issuing commands. Turn around, hands visible, don't reach for anything. Malik didn't match his energy. He stayed still, he spoke slow, he kept his hands away from his pockets. And Kessler hated that. Because Malik wasn't acting scared, he wasn't babbling, he wasn't begging to be let go. He was just steady, professional. The exact thing a power-tripping officer reads as attitude. Kessler demanded to know what Malik was doing back there. Malik gave a simple answer through his calm tone and minimal movement. He was waiting on a driver, and he wasn't doing anything illegal. That should have been the end. It wasn't. Kessler started building a story out loud. Suspicious person, loitering, possible trespass. Then he tried the classic trap. Rapid-fire questions meant to trip you up. Where do you live? Why are you here? What's in your bag? What's in the vehicle? Who are you meeting? You could hear the shift. It wasn't about safety, it was about dominance. Malik didn't argue the way people think arguing looks. No shouting, no insults. He just held a boundary. He asked plainly what Malik was being detained for. He asked if he was free to leave. He said he could identify himself, but he wasn't consenting to searches, and he wasn't going to do random hood-of-the-car theater without a reason. That made Kessler's voice jump up another level. Kessler stepped closer, too close. Malik took one small step back, not dramatic, just enough to keep space. Kessler interpreted that as defiance. He angled his body like he was preparing to grab Malik. This is the part people miss when they watch clips online. The escalation usually isn't one big moment. It's tiny choices stacked on the top of each other. Distance, tone, threats disguised as orders. That's how a routine interaction turns into a confrontation. Now, rewind. Malik Carter wasn't out there looking for trouble. He'd spent most of that day in suit and tie mode, rotating between protective work planning and coordination calls. He was in town on an advanced detail, not some fantasy spy mission. Real work, timing, routes, access points. He'd stepped away from his team for a few minutes to meet a contracted driver in the plaza. The driver got delayed. Malik waited where he could see the pickup area and keep situational awareness. Standard. He also didn't broadcast what he did for a living. Agents don't do that. He wore plain clothes, neutral jacket, clean haircut, no big logos, no tactical cosplay. Just a guy who looked like he belonged anywhere. Which is exactly why Kessler decided he didn't belong there. Kessler had been patrolling that district like he owned it. He had been with the department long enough to be comfortable. Too comfortable. He liked being the guy who handled things. He also had a pattern. Stop first, justify later. People around town knew it. They didn't always say it out loud. They just avoided him. That evening, he rolled into the plaza on a slow loop. He spotted Malik standing near the service lane. Black man, alone. Hands calm, not frantic, not acting guilty, just waiting. Kessler read that as a challenge. You could practically see it in how he parked. Not a normal pull-up. He cut the angle to block space. Quick stop, door open fast. That posture cops use when they want you to feel the weight of the uniform before they even speak. He approached Malik and started with suspicion, not greeting. Not, hey, you okay? Not, everything all right? It was straight into control mode. Malik responded the way trained professionals respond. He stayed polite. He didn't mirror hostility. He gave only what he needed to give. He kept his hands visible. He didn't reach for anything. Kessler kept pushing. Malik tried to end it clean. He said he was federal law enforcement and he was on duty. He said he could show credentials. He didn't do it fast. He didn't do it flashy. He did it the safe way. Slow movements, clear communication, hands staying where Kessler could see them. That's when the power chess game got real. Because Kessler didn't want Malik to be federal. He wanted Malik to be a suspicious guy so he could win the interaction. He wanted the story to end with compliance. Maybe a search, maybe a lecture, maybe cuffs for officer safety. The usual. Malik's federal status ruined that script. So Kessler tried to call it a bluff. He accused Malik of lying without using the exact word. He implied impersonation. He said people carried fake badges. He said he'd seen it before. He demanded Malik hand over whatever ID he had and kept saying he'd decide what was real. Here's the thing. Secret Service credentials aren't a library card. You don't just toss them to an agitated officer who's already escalating. Agents are trained on how to present identification safely. Malik followed that. He told Kessler where the credentials were. He asked if Kessler wanted him to retrieve them slowly. He kept his hands open and visible. All method. Meanwhile, the environment changed. A nurse in scrubs walked out of the pharmacy and slowed down. A delivery driver stopped near the curb and watched. The store manager hovered near the entrance, pretending to straighten a display, but his eyes stayed locked on the scene. Phones came out. Quietly. Not dramatic. Just reality in 2026. People don't trust it'll be handled internally anymore. They record first. Kessler noticed the phones. That should have made him chill out. Instead, it made him double down. Some officers treat witnesses like threats. Malik finally produced the badge and credentials. Not thrust forward. Not waved around. Presented in a controlled way so Kessler could read it without Malik stepping into his space. And for half a second, Kessler froze. His face did that quick recalculation people do when they realize they might have messed up. It wasn't remorse, it was risk assessment. Then he made the worst possible choice. He rejected it. He dismissed it like it was a fake. He talked over it. He acted like he'd caught Malik trying something. He said he was going to detain Malik until he could verify it. And he said it like Malik was some criminal who'd been caught mid-scam. That's the mask-off moment right there. Because verification is normal. The way Kessler handled it wasn't. He wasn't trying to confirm identity. He was trying to punish Malik for not folding. Malik didn't raise his voice. He didn't get baited. He didn't give Kessler anything to twist into resisting. He just stated clearly that he was a federal agent, that Kessler needed a supervisor, and that the situation was being recorded. Kessler's jaw tightened again. He looked around at the phones. He looked back at Malik. Then he reached for his radio. And that's when the chain reaction started. Dispatch, supervisors, and a level of oversight Kessler couldn't control. Kessler hit his radio and started talking like he was already writing the report in his head. He told dispatch he had a male subject claiming to be federal law enforcement. He said he needed verification. He left out the part where he'd escalated first. He left out the part where Malik had offered credentials calmly. He left out the crowd and the phones. Malik stayed in place, hands visible, body angled slightly away from Kessler's reach. That's not attitude, that's survival math. Kessler tried to regain control with volume and pace. He moved in tighter again, like he wanted to box Malik against the curb. He kept demanding Malik hand over the badge. Malik didn't comply with that part. He kept the credentials positioned where Kessler could read them without taking them. Smart, safe, standard. Kessler didn't like it. So he went for the threat that usually works on normal civilians: detainment for officer safety. He said Malik was going in cuffs until everything checked out. That's when Malik forced the moment into the light. He didn't bark, he didn't plead. He stated the consequences. He said Kessler was about to unlawfully detain a federal agent on duty. He said this would trigger notifications. He said he was requesting Kessler's supervisor immediately. He also said the entire interaction was on Bodycam and being recorded by witnesses. That last part mattered. You could feel it. Kessler glanced at the bystanders again. 2 phones were clearly up now, one held low, one held chest high. A third person had stopped near the coffee spot door with their camera pointed straight at the service lane. Kessler's eyes did the quick scan officers do when their confidence meets a liability. Then he tried a different tactic: the humiliation angle. He asked Malik if he even knew what Secret Service did. He implied Malik was impersonating and would be charged. He said he could make this easy if Malik just complied and stopped playing games. Malik didn't bite. He repeated the same points, clean and boring. Federal law enforcement on duty, credentials presented. Supervisor requested. No consent to searches, no sudden movements. And now, dispatch was responding. Dispatch asked Kessler for details: badge number, agency, name. Kessler gave Malik's name, but you could tell he didn't want to. He sounded irritated, saying it out loud like it tasted wrong. Dispatch asked him to spell it. He snapped the letters off fast. Then dispatch asked the question that started pulling the rug out from under him: did the subject provide credentials? Kessler hesitated. He answered in a way that tried to keep control of the narrative. He said yes, but he couldn't confirm authenticity. He said he was maintaining officer safety. He said he needed a supervisor on scene. Dispatch acknowledged, and then said they were contacting a sergeant. That's the first domino. Because once a sergeant hears possible federal credentials, the game changes. It's not optional. The department doesn't want a lawsuit. They don't want a federal complaint. They don't want a call from D.C. asking why their patrol officers cuffing a Secret Service agent behind a pharmacy. And Malik knew that. He didn't say it like a threat. He said it like a fact. Kessler tried to keep Malik frozen in place while he waited. He positioned himself like a gate. He watched Malik's hands like Malik was the problem. He asked again where Malik's vehicle was. He asked again who Malik was really meeting. He kept fishing for something he could justify on paper. Malik stayed tight. He gave nothing extra. Then the sergeant arrived. Sergeant Elena Park pulled in fast but not reckless. She didn't rush up yelling. She walked in, took a 3-second look at Kessler's posture, Malik's posture, and the crowd. She saw it immediately. She saw who was escalating. Kessler started talking the moment she stepped in. He tried to frame it like Malik was the one being difficult. He said Malik refused orders. He said Malik was argumentative. He said Malik was not cooperating. Park didn't accept the story at face value. She asked the simplest question in the world: what was the original reason for contact? Kessler gave a weak answer: suspicious person, loitering, service lane. Could be casing. Park looked around, cameras on the building, people recording. A normal public plaza, no posted, no trespassing signs in sight. Then she looked at Malik. She didn't ask him to perform respect. She asked for clarity. Malik presented credentials again, the same careful way. Park didn't snatch them. She read them. Her face changed. Not panic, not worship. Just that professional recognition of a situation that can cost the department money and careers if mishandled. Park asked Malik if he was on duty. Malik confirmed. Park asked Kessler if he had demanded Malik's badge be handed over. Kessler tried to talk around it. Park cut through it and told him to step back. That moment right there, that's when Kessler lost the room. Because now it wasn't Kessler versus Malik. It was Kessler versus reality. And reality had witnesses. Park got on her own radio and requested dispatch verify credentials through proper channels. She also asked for a lieutenant to be notified, because she wasn't about to carry this alone. Kessler stood off to the side, jaw tight, watching Park talk like he'd been betrayed. Then dispatch came back with the confirmation pathway. They didn't confirm everything over open air for obvious reasons. They confirmed enough. They indicated the agency contact line. They indicated the supervisor contact. Park nodded, got the number, and made the call. That call changed Kessler's body language more than anything else, because now it wasn't maybe. Now it was official process. While Park made the call, Kessler tried to start undoing the last 10 minutes with excuses. He said Malik's behavior raised red flags. He said he had to check. He said people impersonate officers. He said he was just doing his job. He tried to make it sound responsible. It didn't land. Because everybody watching had seen the tone, the posture, the threats. They'd seen Kessler reject credentials. They'd seen him escalate when Malik stayed calm. They'd seen him get louder when phones came out. And Park had seen the same thing with a badge in her hand. Then the other agencies showed up. Without even showing up, Park got off the phone and her tone shifted. More formal, more careful. She told Malik calmly that his supervisor had been notified and was aware of the location. She told him they were going to conclude the contact immediately. Then she turned to Kessler and told him to stop speaking and to deactivate his ego before he made it worse. Kessler didn't listen. He couldn't help himself. He asked Malik, loud enough for the bystanders to hear, why Malik didn't just say he was Secret Service from the start. That was wild, because Malik had said it early. Kessler just didn't believe him. Malik didn't clap back. He didn't lecture. He gave one clean response through the narrator's reporting. He had identified himself, he had offered credentials, and Kessler had chosen escalation anyway. Park told Kessler to get in his car. Kessler started to protest. Park didn't argue. She gave him a direct order. He finally moved, stiff and angry, and walked toward his cruiser like someone walking away from a fight they thought they were winning. Park then spoke with Malik briefly, professional to professional. She asked if Malik wanted medical attention, if he felt threatened, if he wanted a formal complaint initiated on scene. Malik didn't make it dramatic. He requested the Bodycam and Plaza camera footage be preserved. He requested witness info be collected. He requested the incident be documented as a federal contact gone wrong. Park agreed, because she had no choice. And just like that, Kessler's routine stop turned into an evidence event. The bystanders didn't disperse right away. A couple people stayed to offer their names and numbers. One guy said he had the entire escalation on video from the first command. The store manager said the exterior cameras covered the service lane and the curb. Park collected what she could and told them the department would follow up. She knew, though. The videos were already leaving the scene. Because that's how it works now. A clip doesn't need the department's permission to go public. Malik left the plaza the same way he'd stood there. Controlled, minimal. Not giving anyone a reason to twist the narrative. Kessler sat in his cruiser, staring forward, trying to look like a man still in control. But the control was gone. Because the Secret Service supervisor had the sergeant's number. The department lieutenant had been notified. Dispatch logs existed, body cam existed, witness video existed, all the receipts. By the next morning, Kessler's routine stop turned into a documented incident with 2 agencies attached to it. Internal Affairs locked down his body cam, cruiser GPS, and dispatch audio. The plaza cameras got preserved too. Witnesses handed over videos. Kessler tried to write a report that made it sound like verification, but the footage showed the real sequence. He escalated first, dismissed valid credentials, then threatened detention anyway. Secret Service leadership contacted the department through formal channels. That raised the heat instantly. Command staff, the city attorney, and supervisors got involved. Kessler was placed on administrative leave while the review moved fast, because this wasn't a messy case, it was clean evidence. Within weeks, the department fired him. Short statement, no long explanations. The clips had already spread online, and the public reaction was blunt. People weren't surprised by the aggression. They were surprised to see consequences happen quickly. The city updated procedures for interagency contacts and reemphasized detention standards and de-escalation, mostly to prevent another officer from trying the same stunt on camera. Malik didn't chase attention. He documented everything, made sure evidence stayed preserved, and kept working. His win wasn't loud. It was official. It was on record. If you were in Malik's position, would you have stayed that calm? Or would you snap back and given the officer the excuse he wanted? Drop your take in the comments. And subscribe for more stories where power trips meet consequences.
Good afternoon. Sheriff's office, need to see some ID, sir.
For what? I'm in my own yard, man. We just cooking.
Got a call. I'll explain in a minute. Let me see the ID first.
A call about burgers?
James, just give it to him.
Yeah, hold up.
Appreciate it. Name and date match what dispatch gave me. You live here?
13 years, same address.
All right, keep it handy. We're good for now.
This rookie deputy thought he was running the whole neighborhood. When he walked into a private backyard BBQ without a warrant, without consent, and with that chest-out attitude. He thought everyone back there would fold. He didn't realize the man he was trying to intimidate was the county's veteran sheriff. And the cameras were already rolling, watched the exact moment his swagger collapsed, and he had to face real consequences. Drop where you're watching from in the comments. Country, state, city, I read them. And if you like stories where people stay calm, know their rights, and force accountability, hit like and subscribe. These situations don't fix themselves. People make them get fixed. Now rewind a second, because this didn't start with a crime. It started with a normal Saturday and 2 deputies who confused a badge with permission. Sheriff Marcus Bennett had the kind of house that made sense for someone who'd spent decades in law enforcement. Not flashy, set back a bit. A fenced backyard, one side gate, a clear private property sign near the latch. He'd hosted the same summer BBQ for years. Family, friends, coworkers from different eras of his career. Nothing wild. Food, music, kids running around. The usual trash talk near the grill. He was off duty, no uniform, no gun on his hip. Just a man trying to have a peaceful afternoon. Most of the guests were black. That matters because it shaped what happened next. You could feel it in how fast the deputies went from checking to controlling. A neighbor had called in something vague, the kind of call that creates trouble because it's built on vibes, not facts. Noise complaint, suspicious gathering, cars parked, smell of smoke. The dispatcher sent 2 patrol deputies from the county unit. Deputy Tyler Crane was the kind of rookie who treated every call like a stage. Big energy, loud presence. He'd been on the road long enough to know how to talk, like he was in charge, but not long enough to know when to slow down and ask the right questions. His partner, Deputy Evan Ricks, followed his lead. The backup brain. He didn't create chaos, but he fed it. He reinforced the posture. He helped make it feel like a raid instead of a check. They didn't go to the front door. That's the first red flag. No knock, no attempt to contact the homeowner like normal people. They walked down the side of the house, opened the gate, and stepped straight into the backyard like they owned it. Bodycam caught the shift instantly. You could see the energy change in the space. People stopped talking. A kid froze with a plate in his hand, and someone near the table leaned back like the air got tight. Crane didn't introduce himself like a professional, then he went straight to control. He started scanning faces, counting bodies, looking for someone to dominate. Then he started demanding identification from the guests like they were lined up outside a club. And here's the thing. Even if they had a legit reason to be there, and they didn't, demanding everyone's ID at a private BBQ without a specific crime is not policing. It's fishing. It's intimidation dressed up as procedure. Ricks hovered behind him, watching reactions, ready to step in. You know that stance. Hands near the belt, weight forward. The posture that says they want someone to give them a reason. Crane focused on the people who looked least likely to fight back. Older relatives, younger guys who didn't want drama. He threw out consequences, detention, interference. The usual, the words that don't mean much unless people panic. Then Bennett moved. At first, he wasn't rushing in. He watched from a few steps back, not because he was scared, because he was reading the situation like he'd done 1,000 times. He looked at where the deputies entered. He looked at how they addressed his guests. He looked at the fact that nobody had invited them back there. He stepped forward and asked the most basic question any homeowner has the right to ask: what business they had entering a fenced backyard. Crane tried to flatten him with authority. He leaned on the idea that a badge equals access. He acted like the deputy's presence automatically made it a lawful investigation. Bennett didn't match the volume. He didn't puff up. He didn't give the deputies the emotional fight they were hunting. He stayed calm and started doing something that makes bad policing fall apart fast. He started asking for specifics: call reason, reported crime, probable cause, consent, exigent circumstances, who gave permission to open a gate and enter the curtilage of a home. Crane didn't have answers. He had attitude. So he reached for the weak excuse. The one deputies love when they've got nothing solid. He claimed they smelled something suspicious. That's when you could tell Bennett's patience moved from annoyed homeowner to professional accountability mode. Because the smell excuse didn't match the scene. No emergency. No screaming. No danger. No active crime visible. Just a family event. And the deputies were standing in the middle of it, demanding IDs like they'd found a criminal operation. Crane slipped into the line that exposed the real motive. Not evidence, not public safety. Just assumptions about a group of black people gathered in one place. He didn't say it in a polite way. He said it like the yard itself looked guilty. That was the mask-off moment. You could feel it. Guests went quiet in a different way. Not confusion, recognition. Bennett didn't argue the social side of it. He didn't lecture. He did what smart people do when they want consequences. He made it procedural. He told them they were trespassing. He told them they entered without consent. He told them they were escalating a non-incident into a constitutional violation. And then he delivered the sentence that changed the whole temperature. He identified himself as Sheriff Marcus Bennett. Not in a dramatic way, not for show. Calm, flat, direct, name and role. The kind of introduction that doesn't need volume. You could see it hit Crane in real time. His shoulders dropped a fraction. His eyes shifted. He stopped scanning the crowd and started scanning for exits. His voice changed. Less command, more uncertainty. Ricks reacted too. He stopped moving like backup and started moving like a witness. He looked at Crane, then at Bennett, then down at the gate like he suddenly remembered how they got there. Bennett didn't give them time to spin a story. He didn't let them retreat and rewrite the narrative later. He forced the accountability to happen while the cameras were still capturing everything. He ordered them to call a supervisor to the scene immediately, not later. Not, we'll talk at the office. Right there. Real-time documentation. That's how you prevent the quiet cover-up. That's how you stop the report from turning into a fairy tale. Crane hesitated. You could see him weighing the options. Push back and risk insubordination against the sheriff. Or comply and accept that he just created a problem with a Bodycam timestamp. He complied, and Bennett made it tighter. He instructed them to keep their cameras on. He asked for the call notes. He wanted to know exactly what had been dispatched and exactly what they were claiming justified entry. He wanted it on record while everybody's memory was fresh and the scene was intact. One of Bennett's relatives, Rochelle, had already been recording pieces on her phone from the side, not in anyone's face, just enough to capture the posture, the demands, the tone. Redundant coverage. Smart. Because Bodycam doesn't always malfunction when there are multiple angles. At that point, the deputies stopped acting like hunters and started acting like employees caught breaking policy. The supervisor, Sergeant Dana Holloway, arrived with the posture of someone expecting a routine mess. That posture changed as soon as she realized who the homeowner was and where her deputies were standing. Bennett didn't yell at her. He didn't grandstand. He did what professionals do. He briefed her in a tight sequence. Entry point, no knock, no consent, demands for ID, flimsy justification, biased language, escalation during a peaceful gathering. And he emphasized the key fact. The deputies had created the incident. Holloway asked for the original complaint details. Bennett wanted the dispatcher contact and CAD notes preserved. He wanted the body cam flagged. He wanted a supervisor summary completed that day. No wiggle room. Crane tried to soften his earlier posture. He tried to reframe it as a safety check. Holloway didn't bite. She asked him direct questions. Why the backyard? Why no front door contact? What exigency? What crime? Crane had nothing but vibes, and vibes don't hold up when the person demanding accountability is the sheriff. That's where part one ends. The moment the power shifted fully. Not because Bennett pulled rank for ego, because he forced process. Process is what breaks misconduct. Process is what survives excuses. Sergeant Dana Holloway didn't walk into that backyard smiling. She walked in scanning. Who's upset? Who's filming? Who's about to sue? She'd seen enough simple calls turn expensive. Then she saw Marcus Bennett. Her face didn't need to say anything. The pause said it all. Bennett kept it tight. He didn't rant. He didn't perform. He gave her a clean sequence like he was briefing a scene for court. He pointed out the entry point. Side gate. No knock. No consent. No contact attempt at the front door. Then the next problem. Deputies demanding ID from guests as if a private BBQ was a stop and frisk line. Then the excuse that didn't match reality. Smell, vague suspicion, nothing urgent, no emergency, no threat. No reason to be inside the fenced backyard. Holloway didn't argue with him. She turned to Crane and Ricks and started asking questions that forced specifics. Call type, exact complaint. What did dispatch say? What did they observe before entering the yard? What was the legal reason to open a gate and step into the home's curtilage? Crane tried to reset the tone. He shifted from command voice to professional explanation voice. He framed it like a safety check, like they were just trying to identify people and make sure nobody was trespassing. Bennett didn't let that sit. He reminded Holloway calmly that nobody had reported a fight, a weapon, or anyone in danger. He reminded her that the deputies didn't even attempt the normal first step: knock, talk, get consent, or leave. Ricks tried to help Crane by adding little phrases that sounded official. Officer safety, investigative detention, keeping the peace. Holloway cut through it. She asked what crime they were investigating. Not vibes, a real offense. That's where the whole thing started falling apart on camera. Because when a deputy can't name the crime, what they're really saying is, they didn't have one. Bennett wasn't just protecting his guests. He was protecting the record. He told Holloway he wanted 3 things done before anyone left that yard. First, the call notes. He wanted the CAD entry pulled and read back. He wanted the original complaint captured in the supervisor notes, not rewritten later. Second, body cam preservation. Both deputies. No missing segments. No accidental stop recording. He wanted the footage tagged for retention immediately. Third, a supervisor summary completed the same day with the entry method stated plainly. side gate entry without consent. That exact language matters. It's the difference between a contact and an unlawful intrusion. Holloway looked irritated, not at Bennett, at the situation, at the mess her deputies had handed her. She stepped away and got on the radio. She requested the call details, asked dispatch to confirm the complaint language, and told them to annotate the event. On-scene supervisor request. Potential policy violation. Bodycam hold. Bennett stayed in control, but not in a cartoon way. He kept his voice even. He kept his hands relaxed. He watched his guests, too. He made sure nobody got baited into an argument that deputies could later spin into disorderly conduct. And the guests were tense. You could see it. The shock had turned into anger, but it was controlled. That's the thing people don't talk about enough. It's exhausting having to stay calm when you're the one being treated like a problem in your own space. Aunt Rochelle kept recording from an angle. Not in faces, not antagonistic, just documenting. She wasn't trying to win an online moment. She was trying to make sure nobody could lie later. Holloway came back with a short version of the call. It was exactly what Bennett expected. It wasn't a crime report. It was a complaint built on assumptions, noise, people, smell of smoke, cars, nothing urgent. Now the deputies had a new problem. Their entry looked worse. They couldn't hide behind, "We were responding to an emergency." There was no emergency to cite. Crane tried one more move. He tried to make the homeowner's questions sound like resistance, like Bennett was interfering, like he was creating a scene. That tactic works on regular people because most people get intimidated by the threat of arrest. It didn't work here. Bennett didn't argue. He simply insisted Holloway document that Crane had demanded IDs from guests without a stated crime and without reasonable suspicion tied to specific individuals. He didn't call Crane names. He didn't speculate. He kept it fact-based. That's how you build a case that survives internal politics. Holloway finally did what good supervisors do when they realize the body cam is a liability. She took control of her deputies. She told them to step back, stop engaging guests, and let her handle it. She then spoke to Bennett like a professional, not like a defensive coworker. She acknowledged the entry issue. She told him she'd generate an incident report and initiate review. She confirmed the footage would be preserved. Crane stood there, quiet. You could see the calculation running in his head. He wanted to keep face, but he couldn't. Not with Bennett in front of him. Not with Holloway writing. Not with cameras on. Bennett didn't gloat. He didn't threaten. He gave Holloway one more instruction that mattered. He told her to ensure the deputies left the way they entered, without lingering, without comments to guests, without retaliatory warnings. Clean exit. No extra harm. Holloway walked them out, and as they moved toward the gate, you could see the shift in posture again. Earlier, Crane had walked in like he was inspecting property he owned. Now he moved like he was trying not to be noticed. Smaller steps, less eye contact. That little stiff nod people do when they realize they crossed a line. The BBQ didn't bounce back right away. That's real. People tried to laugh again, tried to pick up plates, tried to restart music. But the mood had changed. Everyone knew it could have gone sideways fast if Bennett wasn't who he was. Later that night, Bennett didn't just let it cool off. He worked the accountability angle like a veteran. He contacted the department's command staff through official channels, not personal favors. He requested the incident number. He requested confirmation in writing that the footage was placed on hold. He requested that internal affairs be notified, not as a threat, but as procedure. He didn't rely on verbal promises. He didn't rely on trust. Paper beats promises. By the next day, the story moved. Quietly at first, guests talked. Family group chats lit up. People shared what they could seen, how the deputies had walked in, who they targeted, how quickly it turned into an ID demand line. Then the clip started circulating in the community. Not the whole thing. Just the moment where the deputy's energy flipped after Bennett identified himself. That's always the part that spreads first, because it exposes the ugly truth in 1 second. Respect wasn't about behavior. It was about status. And the department couldn't ignore it, because now this wasn't a complaint filed by some citizen. It was the sheriff's home, sheriff's guests, sheriff's direct order for documentation, supervisor on scene, body cam hold, multiple recordings. The chessboard was set, and the deputies had already made their move. By Monday, the department couldn't treat it like a small complaint. There was an incident number. A supervisor had responded. Bennett had requested body cam preservation on scene. Guests had phone video. Dispatch records existed. And the homeowner was the sheriff, which meant this wouldn't get handled quietly and buried. Internal Affairs opened a case that day. Bennett didn't push it through back channels. He did it the way he expected any resident to be taken seriously. He requested the case number, the assigned investigator, and written confirmation that all related footage was being retained. From there, the investigation followed the timeline, not opinions. IA focused on decision points. Why the deputies skipped the front door. Why they opened a side gate into a fenced backyard. What they observed before entering. What crime they believed was occurring. Why they demanded identification from guests. Whether any exigent circumstance existed, Crane's written explanation leaned on broad phrases like safety and investigating suspicious activity. The footage didn't support the framing. Bodycam showed the sequence clearly and entry first, justification later. It showed immediate control tactics. It showed ID demands without tying suspicion to any specific person. It showed escalation without a threat. And it captured the line that revealed the mindset behind it. IA pulled the dispatch audio and CAD notes. The original call wasn't an emergency. No report of violence. No weapon. No person in danger. It was a vague complaint about a gathering, noise, cars, and smoke. That made the backyard entry harder to justify. Next came witness interviews. Bennett gave his statement, then guests gave theirs. Their accounts lined up: peaceful event, sudden entry, aggressive tone, ID demands, and pressure tactics that didn't match the situation. Sergeant Holloway's on-scene response mattered too. She had taken control when she arrived and documented the issue, which made it harder for the deputies to rewrite the story later. Command staff reviewed the footage as part of the process. That's when the department had to decide whether it was going to defend the entry or admit it was wrong and discipline it. The discipline landed in tears. Crane took the heavier consequences because he led the entry and drove the escalation. He was suspended, ordered into remedial training, and placed under formal performance review conditions that made it clear another violation would trigger termination steps. Ricks also faced discipline for supporting the conduct and reinforcing the ID demands. He received a suspension, retraining, and a written reprimand that followed him in his file. Then the civil side started moving. Bennett didn't need to file anything to make it real. Guests had potential claims tied to unlawful entry and unlawful detention demands. An attorney requested footage and records through proper channels: body cams, dispatch audio, CAD notes, the supervisor summary, and training and policy materials. The county's legal team pushed for early resolution. They understood what a jury would see on video: fenced backyard entry without consent, followed by blanket ID demands, followed by shifting explanations. A settlement was reached later rather than letting it turn into a public trial. Details stayed limited, but the department couldn't hide the fact that it cost them. Bennett's bigger focus was policy. He issued a directive that made backyard entry rules explicit. Deputies needed consent, a warrant, or an actual exigent circumstance they could clearly articulate. He also added a supervisor review requirement for any complaint involving warrantless entry into residential curtilage, with same-shift documentation. Training changed to match the policy. Deputies ran scenarios where they had to state their legal grounds on camera before acting. If they couldn't explain it, they didn't get to do it. Dispatch procedures changed too. Call takers were instructed to ask more clarifying questions on vague, suspicious gathering complaints, so perception wouldn't get treated like probable cause. Weeks later, Bennett hosted another BBQ. People showed up, but the conversation had changed. Guests talked about what to do if officers entered private property: stay calm, ask the reason, ask for a supervisor, and document what happens. That was the real aftermath, not just punishment. A shift in how people and the department approached the line between authority and rights. So here's the question. If officers walked into your backyard and started demanding IDs, what would you do first? Comment it. Share this with someone who needs it. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe and stick around.
All right, hands where I can see them. License and registration. Now.
What's the problem, officer?
None of your business. Just give me your paperwork.
I'm federal law enforcement. I can be verified through dispatch or a supervisor.
I don't care what you say you are. You're not leaving until I figure this out.
Then verify me the normal way. Call a supervisor.
All right.
This rookie deputy thought he was untouchable when he pulled over a black driver for no reason, but he made a fatal career mistake. He didn't realize he was harassing a federal Secret Service agent with the power to fight back. Watch how one man's ego triggered a massive federal investigation. Red and blue lights sat behind a dark SUV on the shoulder. Deputy Tyler Briggs was already running hot at the driver's window. New deputy, big voice, acting like the stop was his stage. Inside the SUV, Calvin Brooks kept it tight and professional. Hands visible. No sudden movement. No argument. He reported he was on official duty and provided identification like he'd done 100 times before. Briggs didn't treat it like routine. He demanded Brooks step out. He kept pushing even after Brooks showed federal credentials. He acted like the credentials were a challenge instead of information. Brooks didn't match the attitude. He stayed calm and repeated a simple request: call a supervisor, document the stop, and confirm who he was through proper channels. Briggs refused. He didn't slow down. He didn't reset. He escalated. He started fishing for reasons out loud. Lane movement, suspicious behavior, vehicle in the area. The kind of vague talk that never matches the footage later. Brooks asked for the specific reason for the stop. Briggs didn't give a clean one. Quick pause. Where are you watching from? Drop your country or state in the comments. And if you like stories where ego meets paperwork and accountability wins, hit like and subscribe. Back to it. Brooks wasn't a random driver. He was a U.S. Secret Service special agent assigned out of a nearby field office. That night, he'd been in Redwood County on a routine advance related to an upcoming protective visit, low-profile vehicle, normal driving, no attention-seeking, just work. Briggs saw a black man in a nice SUV near a high-dollar exit and decided he was going to make a stop. Redwood County had corridors where deputies like to hunt. Lots of proactive traffic work. Lots of stops that somehow landed on the same kinds of drivers. Brooks pulled over clean and followed protocol because he could tell this wasn't about a traffic violation. It was about control. Briggs wanted submission. Brooks gave procedure. That's what set Briggs off. Brooks stayed respectful but firm. He requested a supervisor again. He reported that the deputy was interfering with a federal protective function. He asked Briggs to call it in and verify through dispatch. Briggs didn't like hearing federal on the side of his road. He treated it like the driver was trying to dodge him. So he did what bad stops always do next. He called for backup. 2 more units arrived and stacked behind his cruiser. More body cams, more witnesses. The scene got bigger, which is exactly what Briggs wanted. He wanted to look in control. A second deputy looked at Brooks's credentials, longer than Briggs did. You could tell it clicked for him. He didn't take over, but he didn't look comfortable either. Briggs kept driving it. He repeated the order to step out. He talked over Brooks. He acted like the stop belonged to him, and nobody was allowed to change the plan. Brooks kept it clean. He asked for names and badge numbers. He noted unit identifiers. He stated the time. He stated the location. He stated he was notifying his field office. Then Brooks made the call. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a direct notification to the Secret Service field office that a county deputy had initiated a baseless stop, escalated after federal identification, and was interfering with an active protective-related assignment. That's when the whole stop changed. Because now this wasn't just a local deputy pressing a driver. This was a local deputy creating an interference report that would land on a federal desk with timestamps, body cam footage, and witnesses. And Briggs still didn't fully understand what he'd just triggered. Backup was already there, and that changed the deputy's posture. More units meant he could perform. He kept the stop active on purpose. He wanted it to look like he'd found something serious. Brooks didn't give him anything. No arguing, no long explanations. He stuck to the same points. He was federal. He was on assignment tied to a protective advance, and he needed a supervisor and proper verification. Briggs kept trying to force a different outcome. He repeated the order to exit the vehicle. He treated Brooks's calm tone like defiance. He tried to make Brooks choose between compliance and escalation. Then the supervisor arrived. Sergeant Linda Carver pulled up and stepped into the cluster of cruisers. She didn't rush. She didn't yell. She looked at Brooks's vehicle, looked at the stacked units, then looked straight at Briggs like she already knew the stop was going to be a problem. Briggs tried to brief her fast. He didn't have one clean reason for the stop. He gave a pile of reasons. He kept it vague. The story shifted mid-sentence like he was building it while he talked. Carver didn't buy it. She asked for the actual violation. Briggs didn't answer cleanly. He went back to suspicious and didn't look right. Carver walked closer to the driver's window, stayed outside the immediate space, and asked Brooks for identification. Brooks provided it again, controlled and simple. Carver saw the credentials and immediately moved into damage control mode. Not because she suddenly cared about Brooks's rights, because she understood jurisdiction. And she understood what it meant if a deputy escalated after being shown federal credentials. Carver told Briggs to step back and calm down. Briggs didn't want to. He didn't want to lose control in front of other deputies. He kept pushing his version of the stop like it was a test of authority. Brooks stayed focused. He told Carver he'd already notified his field office. He reported the time the stop started. He reported that the deputy continued escalating after federal identification. He reported that this was interference with federal duties. Carver's next move showed exactly how departments try to survive these moments. She tried to end it quietly. She told Brooks he'd be free to go once everything is confirmed. She suggested it was just a misunderstanding. She acted like the solution was to wrap it up before it became a report. Brooks didn't accept that. He didn't get loud. He didn't threaten anyone. He didn't insult the department. He simply refused to let it become an off-the-books event. He stated that it needed to be documented. He stated he wanted the stop recorded as initiated without a valid violation. He stated he wanted the names and badge numbers of everyone on scene. That's the part officers hate. Not because it's wrong, because it removes their ability to rewrite later. While Carver tried to smooth it out, Brooks's phone was already active. The Secret Service field office supervisor on the other end didn't care about local misunderstandings. She cared about interference. She asked for the location. She asked for the deputy's name. She asked for the supervisor's name. She asked for the incident number. She asked whether Brooks had been detained or ordered out after presenting credentials. Brooks answered each point. Carver could hear enough to understand what was coming next. She tried one more time to steer it into a quiet release. She told Briggs to end the stop. Briggs still tried to salvage it. He pushed for a citation. He pushed for a search. He pushed for something that made the stop look justified. Carver shut it down. She ordered the stop terminated. Brooks was released. No ticket, no warning. No apology, just an awkward, "you're free to go" vibe that didn't match the way the stop started. But the real damage was already done. Because now the Secret Service had an interference report in motion with timestamps, unit identifiers, and multiple body cams. Brooks had names. Brooks had a witness filming from across the road. Brooks had a supervisor present who heard the federal notification. And Carver had something else. A rookie deputy who didn't just make a bad stop. He forced the entire department into a position where federal agencies could demand records. Brooks drove off and didn't celebrate. That's not how people like him operate. He treated it like a security incident and started documenting while it was still fresh. Meanwhile, back at the scene, Carver pulled Briggs aside. It wasn't a pep talk. It was a warning. Because once federal attention locks on, it doesn't stop at one traffic stop. It goes looking for patterns, and Redwood County had years of patterns. The next morning, Redwood County tried to act like nothing happened. They didn't call Brooks to apologize. They didn't open with accountability. They opened with containment. A lieutenant contacted Carver and asked for a summary for the file, not a full report request. A summary. That's how you keep things flexible. Carver didn't have that luxury. The Secret Service already had an interference notification logged. That meant federal documentation existed before the county wrote a single sentence. Hard timestamps, names, units. A paper trail the county couldn't edit. And Brooks didn't just notify. He followed through. He sent a formal incident package to his field office. Location, sequence, officer names, supervisor presence, the escalation after credentials, and the release without any citation. Clean and factual. No emotion. That style hits harder than anger because it reads like an operational problem, not a personal complaint. Within 48 hours, Redwood County got the first request, not a friendly one. It asked for body cam from every deputy on scene. Dash cam, CAD logs, radio traffic. The deputy's stop narrative, the supervisor's narrative, unit GPS history, and the stop data for that corridor going back months. That last part is where departments start sweating, because one bad stop is a mistake. A pattern is policy. Redwood County's command staff held an internal meeting and did what too many departments do. They tried to isolate the rookie as a one-off. They framed Briggs as inexperienced. They hinted communication issues. They acted like the solution was extra training and a quiet write-up. Then internal affairs got involved, and the tone changed again. IA investigator Raul Mendoza wasn't brought in because leadership wanted truth. He was brought in because leadership needed someone to say, they looked into it. Mendoza had seen that play before. He pulled the body cam first. It showed what Brooks described. The deputy initiated a stop with no clear violation. The deputy escalated after federal identification. The deputy kept stacking vague reasons instead of one factual reason. The supervisor arrived and ended the stop without a citation. Mendoza didn't stop there. He never stopped at this incident. He requested Briggs's prior stop reports. Not just the last week, the last several months. He pulled the wording patterns. He pulled the common phrases. He pulled who got searched. He pulled who got ordered out. He pulled who got consent requests. He pulled who got warnings and who got paperwork. It didn't take long. Briggs' stops leaned hard in one direction. Same type of driver. Same quarters. Same foggy justifications. Same escalation pattern when people asked basic questions. Mendoza then did the thing departments fear. He compared Briggs to the unit culture around him. Because rookies don't invent patterns alone, they copy what gets rewarded. He pulled training records, de-escalation refreshers that were supposed to happen yearly, missing for entire squads. Constitutional policing modules, completed on paper, not in practice. Complaint handling, repeated not sustained outcomes with thin documentation. Then he pulled citizen complaints and internal notes. And that's where the rot showed itself. The county had been collecting complaints about racial profiling for years. The complaints didn't disappear, they just got managed. Same language in the closures, same vague findings, same supervisors signing off. No corrective action, no monitoring, no meaningful retraining, no policy updates. Mendoza found an internal list of hot areas where deputies were encouraged to be proactive. It wasn't written as a racist document. It didn't need to be. It was geography coded as suspicion. The exit near the resort, the road by the gated communities, the stretch that fed into older black neighborhoods. Stop volume wasn't the only thing that spiked there. Search rates spiked. Order to exit rates spiked. Consent requests spiked. And the hit rate didn't match the aggression. Lots of intrusion, not much contraband. That's a classic profiling footprint. Then a deputy talked. Not at first, not proudly. Evan Cole had been around long enough to know what the department did when heat came in. They protected the top and sacrificed the bottom. He saw how quickly leadership started positioning Briggs as the lone problem, even though the corridor tactics were older than Briggs's academy graduation. Cole sat with Mendoza and confirmed what the stats already hinted. Briggs wasn't acting alone. He was acting like a deputy trying to fit in. He'd been encouraged to make stops. He'd been praised for being aggressive. He'd been told the corridor was where the work is. He'd been taught which drivers needed checking without anyone saying it out loud. And now a federal agent had been the one to trigger the alarm. That's what made this different. A local resident complaint could be ignored. A federal interference report couldn't. That's when the Department of Justice stepped in. The U.S. Attorney's Office requested materials. Department of Justice Civil Rights asked for broader data sets, not just Briggs. Stop demographics, search demographics, use of force reports tied to traffic stops, complaint records, training compliance, supervisory review practices. Department of Justice didn't care about Redwood County's feelings. Department of Justice cared about whether the department ran a pattern of unconstitutional policing. And the more Redwood County tried to limit the scope, the more it looked like concealment. Mendoza completed his internal findings and sent them up. The conclusion was simple. Briggs made the stop. Briggs escalated it. But the department's training gaps, supervision failures, and long-standing stop patterns set the stage. That's the part leadership couldn't talk their way out of. Because once you prove leadership knew about repeated complaints and did nothing, the case stops being about one deputy. It becomes deliberate indifference. And deliberate indifference is how you get federal oversight, massive civil exposure, and years of records dragged into court. By the end of that week, Redwood County wasn't asking, how do we discipline Briggs? They were asking, how far back are they going to look? Redwood County tried to end it fast. They fired Deputy Tyler Briggs within 2 weeks and pushed a statement that made him sound like the only problem. Rookie mistake. Failure to follow procedure. Corrective action taken. They wanted the headline to be simple. Department of Justice didn't accept simple because the federal request didn't stop at Briggs. They widened. They pulled 5 years of stop data, then 10. They asked for every complaint tagged profiling, traffic stop, search, attitude, failure to identify reason, even when the department had closed them as not sustained. They also pulled internal emails and supervisor notes. That's where departments get hurt. Numbers show patterns. Messages show intent. And the pattern was clear. Stops clustered in specific corridors, same neighborhoods, same exits, same demographics taking the hit. The searches didn't line up with results. High intrusion, low discovery, that's not good police work. That's harassment dressed up as enforcement. Then came the training and supervision failures. The department claimed it had policies. Department of Justice and IA looked at what actually happened. Missing refreshers. No meaningful audits. Supervisors signing off on vague narratives. Complaint outcomes that repeated the same language like a rubber stamp. Redwood County's shield wasn't just the badge, it was the routine. Deny, close, move on. The Secret Service interference report broke that routine. Because Agent Calvin Brooks didn't just complain, he documented. He stayed controlled. He put the event into federal channels with timestamps and names, while the stop was still fresh. That forced Redwood County into a fight on a field they didn't control. Civil lawsuits came next. Not just Brooks's case. Other drivers came forward after the news hit local groups and social feeds. People who'd been stopped in the same corridor. People who remembered the same vague reasons and the same pressure tactics. People who didn't have credentials, didn't have cameras, and didn't have anyone listening back then. The county's legal strategy cracked in public. They tried to lean on qualified immunity and routine defenses. Plaintiffs' attorneys didn't treat it like a one-off incident. They argued pattern. They argued supervision failure. They argued deliberate indifference. They pointed at ignored complaints and missing corrective action. And the county couldn't hide behind, "We didn't know." Internal Affairs had records showing they did know. Financial pressure hit fast. Insurance carriers started asking questions. Settlements became real numbers. The county board started arguing in meetings about budgets instead of optics. That's when accountability becomes unavoidable, when it costs. Department of Justice pushed for structural changes. They demanded policy updates with enforcement teeth, real stop documentation standards, required articulation of cause, mandatory supervisor review for searches and prolonged detentions, Bodycam compliance auditing, complaint intake reforms, anti-bias training that wasn't a checkbox, early warning tracking for deputies with repeated stop complaints. The department fought it at first, then they realized the alternative was worse. Federal oversight meant monitoring, reporting, and consequences if they didn't comply. No more quiet closures, no more not sustained without real analysis. No more hiding patterns behind paperwork. Command staff tried to protect themselves. Some blamed the rookie, some blamed the climate, some blamed misunderstandings. Department of Justice kept dragging it back to one question. Why did this keep happening with no correction? That's how a rookie's ego dismantled a whole department's comfort. Because Briggs wasn't some mastermind. He was a symptom. He acted like he'd been taught. He acted like he'd seen others act. He just did it to the wrong person on the wrong night with too many cameras running. Brooks's personal outcome stayed straightforward. He didn't do interviews for attention. He didn't tour the story. He did what professionals do. He cooperated with investigators. He provided documentation. He answered questions. He let the process do the work. He also made one thing clear in his statements. He wasn't asking for special treatment because he was federal. He was pointing out that the stop should never have happened to anyone. That line mattered. It made the case bigger than him. In the end, Briggs lost his job and his certification process got reviewed. The department faced federal oversight and civil exposure that reached way beyond one stop. Supervisors got disciplined for failures to review, failures to correct, failures to document. The sheriff's office had to rebuild policies under pressure instead of choice. And the public finally saw what people in that county had been saying for years. One deputy's arrogance didn't just ruin his own career. It pulled the curtain back on a whole system that depended on nobody pushing back with evidence. So here's the question for you. If you were in that driver's seat, would you have stayed calm and recorded everything? Or would you have tried to argue your way out and made it worse? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories where accountability actually lands, subscribe to the channel